Hello friends and welcome to the channel. Today we are going to be creating a sweater that is perfect for Halloween, and unfortunately this video I think will be out just a few days shy of Halloween or a few days past Halloween, so apologies for that. So this is the Marceline cat sweater. It's inspired by Marcy's outfit from, I think it's like season 4. And if I got the episodes right, it's like 2 in a row. It's like episode 13 and 14. I don't know, that's just off my head. I actually designed this sweater a year ago, and that's when I looked up what season and episodes this is. So if I remember, or if I'm even vaguely close to the episode number and the season that's in, that's pretty impressive because I haven't looked that up for a whole year. So a couple notes about the sweater. Because it was designed by me a year ago, there's a couple things that are different than what I do now. One of the main things that I would caution you on is the gauge. It is a very loose gauge. Now I knit more tight knit gauges, so if you're not a fan of like loose gauges where you might have to wear something underneath, you might want to do like a tighter gauge or a chunkier yarn. I would really recommend going with a chunkier yarn, because if you do a tighter gauge, then what you'll have to do is recalculate all of the math that's essentially in the pattern. So that would be quite time consuming. So I'm going to be walking you through the pattern, and at the end you will have your very own Marceline Vampire Queen cat sweater. If you're interested in buying the pattern or using it to create your own sweater, then you can check it out at my Etsy. So let's go. So we're going to start by moving every other stitch out into position E. So there should be 93 stitches out here for now because I'm doing a medium size. And then we are going to cast on with waste yarn. So I set my tension dial to 4.5 for now, and we'll just start by knitting one row. And then we're going to want to place a cast on comb onto each loop. So it looks like this. You can take the working end of your waste yarn and tuck it into this little divot. And then we want to knit at least 5 more rows. That's enough for me, so I'm going to go ahead and cut my working yarn, put it into the same little holster as the other guy, and now we get to start with our true project yarn. So now we want to make sure our tension dial is at 4.5 and our row counter is at 0. And we are going to knit 20 rows at this 4.5 tension. Okay, and now we've knit 20 rows, and we want to change our tension dial to 7. And we'll knit 1 row. That's going to be our turning row. So when we fold this ribbing over, that will allow it to kind of fold nicely instead of bunching up like a circle. It will be a little more flat. So then we change our tension dial back to 4.5 and we knit another 20 rows. All right, that's 20 rows, and you can even see the center stitch right there. So if you've watched my other videos, you might be thinking, oh, okay, now we're gonna drop them and pick them back up. But as you've noticed, we haven't been knitting every stitch. We've been knitting every other stitch. So this is a mock ribbing. So what we're gonna do is we're just going to find the stitches that correspond to our cast on stitch and fold it over that way. So if we're looking at our cast on, we can clearly see these pink purl bumps. Those indicate the start of a new stitch. So what we want to do is we want to find our very first one. So it will be this one over here. You're going to pick up the black part of the pearl bump, as you can see right there, and put it on our needle. At this point, it might be easier to remove your cast-on comb. There we go. And then we just continue. We pick up the next pearl bump. See, it's right here. And then the pearl bump that is right above the pink guy is this guy right here, and we are going to put him on the needle. And we just keep doing that across the entire knit. Oops. Try not to grab the waste yarn, because that will cause problems for you later when you're trying to remove the waste yarn. Okay, I've realized that I have made a mistake. So at this point, this mistake is not that bad, but the perfectionist in me is going to redo it. So you know how every stitch in between these pink pearl bumps, I was like, oh, grab this bar in between? Well, that's correct. But I also should have been grabbing the top bar from the rest of the knitting. So I'm gonna go ahead and start from the side and try again. So this is a close-up on how to pick up our in-between stitches. So you can see here we have our bar float. We're gonna pick that up. And then you can also see we have kind of just a row of floats. And the very top one is the one you're gonna wanna grab, and you just put those on your needle. So now I'm going to set my tension dial to 7 and my row counter back to 0. And you can remove the waste yarn here if you'd like. It's optional, or you can remove it later. But I would definitely recommend putting some weights on your work. And we're going to knit 98 rows. Since this is the front panel, we are now going to start working on the cat design that will go right in the middle, and we're going to decrease every row as well. So we're going to start by decreasing 1 on both sides. Okay, this is where the start of our color work is going to be. I am setting the carriage to hold, and that way we can knit over this without it moving the stitches down. And there's that, and now we decrease once more on both sides. Now I take a spare one of our yarns, and I'm going to keep this yarn associated with the left side here, and the yarn that's already in work associated with the right side. So first I put everything that I want in red out into hold, so the same as last time, +1 on both sides. And then I'm going to put some of the left stitches out here on hold as well. Every time now before we knit, we want to make sure that our carriage has the right settings. So we want to make sure that the direction of the side I'm knitting on is on hold, and it is. And now we put these on hold. And I'm going to move the gray stitches back into work. Now from this point forward, I only use the technique of putting stitches out into position E that we want to work. So essentially, take your carriage off of hold and change the setting. Instead of N for normal knitting, change it to P. And that way you're only going to knit whatever needles you put out into position E, and it's a lot easier and faster to do it that way. And then we just follow the same technique for the rest of the cat design. We are not doing decreases the whole way, we're only doing 10 rows worth of decreases. And now we're going to knit the remaining rows until we get to RC equals 132. Okay, and now we are going to work on the neckline and shoulder shaping. So we're going to set our row counter back to 0. Your carriage should start on the right, and we are going to set your carriage to the hold setting. Move the center 11 stitches into position E. And then also everything on the left. We're going to knit 1, wrap our yarn, okay, put the next stitch into position E, knit 1, wrap,
We're going to continue this pattern until we get to RC equals 18, and then we start with something slightly different. Okay, so we are on RC equals 18, and we are going to start a slightly new pattern. I'm going to push this needle out, the collar stitch needle out. We're going to knit one as normal and wrap. But from now on, after we wrap the center, we are actually going to also put 2 of the shoulder stitches on hold as well. Put those 2 out, and then we knit, and then we wrap around the bottom one there, and put this guy out. Knit, wrap around here, 2 out here, wrap, 1, wrap, oops, 2. We are on row counter 28. This is our last one. We're going to put the center stitch out on hold. And we're going to knit one. And the rest of these bad boys all go out to hold. And we are going to give ourselves a good amount of spare yarn, and we are going to cut our working yarn. And then we just repeat the same thing on the left side. Okay, and now we're going to cast off with at least 3 rows of waste yarn. And now we are going to make the back panel, and to do that you just do all the same steps as the front panel, except for with 2 main caveats. The first is you don't need to make the cat design, and the second is that the neckline and collar shaping is slightly shallower, and so that means that our actual panel needs to be slightly longer, so we're going to knit until RC equals 136. Now that we are here at the neckline and shoulder shaping, there are some slight differences. Technique, ultimately the same. Main differences is how many rows we're going to knit and how many stitches we're going to put on hold. Last time we did 11, and this time we will do 13 for the center. And my carriage is on the left, so I'm just going to pick it up and move it over to the right. Okay, now we want to set our row counter back to 0. And let's get started. So now we are on RC equals 13. So first we are going to wrap as we would usually do, and then we are going to put onto hold 2 shoulder stitches. Then we knit, wrap, 1C, knit, wrap, 2S, knit, wrap, 1C, knit, wrap, 2S, knit, wrap, 1C, knit, wrap, 2S, knit, 1C, wrap, knit, and then we are going to push them all onto hold, cut our working yarn, and do the same on the left side. Now we're going to work the collar. So we want to pick up all of the stitches for the neckline for each panel in between our shoulders. So you can see if I tug here, that stitch gets smaller. So in between those 2 stitches on both sides is how we know where our collar line starts and stops. A trick I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually pick up this stitch and I'm going to put it on the same needle as the last one for the collar, and that will just help there not be a hole there when we seam the shoulders together later. So now that all of our stitches are on the needles, we are going to start working the mock ribbing in the same exact fashion. You have a couple options for technique here. You can either drop every other stitch. I know we just picked them up, but we can grab them again later. If you are worried about your stitches falling off because of your waste yarn is falling off, like mine is over here, you can decrease your stitch over to the right so that your stitch doesn't fall off and it will just kind of like be connected to the other one. Or you can knit 1 row and then you can thread a waste yarn in between each stitch and drop it off but keep it on the waste yarn. It would essentially be like a fail-safe line. That's a lot of work, so I won't be doing that one. For this side, I'm going to just be dropping every other stitch. This side we will see based on stitches because this pink yarn really kind of loosened up really fast, so I'm just gonna go case by case on that one. But over here, yeah, I'm a bit paranoid of these stitches dropping because it's a real mess if they do. So I'll just be decreasing on this side over here. Okie dokie. And now we are just going to knit the collar here the same way that we knit the bottom of the ribbing. So we're going to change our tension dial to 4.5, change our row counter to 0, and we are going to start by knitting 12 rows. Then we're going to change our tension dial to 7 and knit 1 row. And then we're going to change our tension dial back to 4.5 and knit 12 more rows. All right, and then we fold over like we did before. Okay, now I'm going to seam the shoulders together. So you could do this just with regular seaming techniques with like hand seaming, but I'm going to use the machine technique because my stitches are going to fall off the other shoulder and I don't want to risk messing it up. So basically we want to put the shoulders that need to be connected right sides together like a sandwich onto the same needles. So at this point in the pattern dictates that we should cast on 60 stitches with an E-wrap cast on, and you can certainly do that, but one of the functions of this being an older pattern is I have new preferences, and I prefer not to seam up the shoulders. I like to just pick up the stitches from the panel itself and then knit up. So we're going to make sure that we still pick up 60 stitches, but what we're going to do, we're going to get our panel wrong side facing, and we are going to find the very center. With our transfer tool, we're going to find the center stitch, and we're kind of just going to pick that bad boy right up. And then we're going to put the two center stitches on either side of the 0. And then you kind of want to find where the decreases start, which on this side you can feel the decreases because it will start to become straight, but you can feel it in your hand as you go up. But you can also tell by following the color work row. So the first row of your color work will also be where your decreases started, on the front at least. We're going to select that stitch with our transfer tool and we are going to place that on the needle. And we will do the same for the other side. Now on this side we don't have the cat motif as a reference, but if you see as I just pick up this panel, you can tell where it starts to go straight. It starts to go straight right about here. So this is where we'll start. Find a stitch, and we will place it on 30. And you can see that this is a little bit lower of a dip than that one, so I'm going to move in my stitch just slightly, and that matches a bit better. And then we are going to just pick up the stitches. So you don't need to pick up every stitch or else we'd run out of needles. What I would recommend is pick up 2, skip 1. And there we have it. So we want to make sure our row counter is at 0 and our tension dial is at 7. So we are going to copy the pattern that we used for the decreases for the body panels, and we are going to increase on both sides every row for 10 rows. So we're going to knit 1 row, increase, knit 1 row, increase, and we're going to do that until RC equals 11. And then we work as normal until RC equals 40. So now we cut our working yarn, leaving enough to weave in later, and we are going to start working with color B, which is our red color. And we are going to work as normal until RC equals 72. So at this point, this is when you'll want to customize the length of your sleeve. This pattern calls for a pretty long sleeve because it helps give it that poofy end volume. But I've had a few people who bought the pattern tell me that they prefer it to be shorter. So at this step, this is when you can customize the length of the sleeve for however long you'd like. A silly kind of trick that you can do is if you lay horizontal, like put your shoulder here and put your arm straight up, that kind of helps tell how long the sleeve is without casting off. But of course, to be the most precise, you'd want to cast off. So from this point forward, we're going to work as normal in our gray color until RC equals 117. And now we want to cast off with waste yarn so that we can reduce the stitch number more effectively without worrying about dropping our stitches. So I'm going to cast off with this yellow waste yarn. So we're aiming to have roughly 2 stitches on every needle. That's going to differ slightly just so that we can get the exact amount of needles in work that we want. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to follow this pattern. 4 needles with double stitches, 1 needle, single stitch. And that should get us in the ballpark range, and then when we're at the end here, we can make final adjustments. Whoa. One, two, three, four. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the correct way to get all these stitches on your needles, every needle needs to have 2 stitches, and then a couple of them need to have 3. And that's how you'll get all your stitches on your needles. I heavily recommend putting some weights on this bad boy because there's so many stitches, it could very easily fly off the handle. And we are just going to repeat the same technique that we used when we created the neckline ribbing. So now that we did all that work to put our stitches back on our needles, we are going to drop every other needle. That is just the way of progress, isn't it? And don't worry, we'll just pick these up later. This is just how we are going to create the ribbing. Okay, and then make sure your carriage is on the correct side. Set your tension dial to 4.5, get your working yarn in there, change your row counter back to 0. And we are going to knit 1 row very slowly. So knit very slowly. Nice. And we're going to knit until RC equals 12. Okay, and then we're going to set our row counter to 7. And we're going to knit 1 row. Set our row counter back to 4.5, and we're going to knit 12 more rows. Okay, and then we will fold our ribbing over, and we will pick up all those stitches that we dropped once we fold it over. Okay, so here is our first stitch where we would have stitches to pick up. So we first want to make sure we pick up everything in between the last work stitch and the next work stitch. So in this case, it's these 2 stitches. So we want to make sure they're both picked up, because if they're not, and we remove this waste yarn, they will drop. And we also want to make sure that we get this top bar here. And there you go. And now we have a regular stitch. All right, I had to do that part off camera because I had to focus. So this is what it looks like after you have all your stitches picked up and back on the needles. Everything is fine and dandy. We're just gonna cast off and then our sleeve will be done. And once we cast off this bad boy, we will just repeat all of the same steps that we did on this side with the other sleeve. And then we'll seam everything up, block it, and we will be done. There'll be a little bit of final work to do on the face of the cat, but otherwise you're pretty much like 90% done. So nice. And there you go. You did it. Now you just need to do the other sleeve and you will be all set. So we have our sweater all seamed up. Now we want to work on doing the black outline for the cat. I just have this black scrap yarn, and I didn't really want to buy extra yarn, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take kind of a long bit of string. That much should probably suffice. Cut it, and then I'm going to unravel it so it's just 2 strands. And of course, if you have black yarn of a lighter weight or like black thread, you could use that. Okay, so here's one bit of our unraveled yarn. And we're just gonna put that on our needle. And now what I like to do for the outline is I like to do back stitch, just a simple back stitch. You can start wherever you'd like on the pattern. Okay, and then the trick is just make sure you split the thread and go back down through it. There you go. And we're just going to repeat that all the way across. Of course, if you want a chunkier border, like a more visible black, then you could just keep the yarn at the same kind of thickness as its standard. But I just think this looks cute, so I prefer to split it. Also try to keep the width of each of one of your splits somewhat consistent. Okay, and now that we are done with the outside of the cat, I'm going to go ahead and work on the eyes.
All right, and now we just need to add the mouth and we'll be done. Apologies for releasing this late. I was planning on releasing this before Halloween, but I got kind of sick, so I wasn't really up to the task. So it came out a bit later than I'd like, but I appreciate all you guys watching this video and supporting me. Here is the final sweater. You've definitely seen pictures of it that were in the thumbnail. They're also like the ones on my Etsy. The main difference with those and these is this is a sweater I made in this video. That sweater was the one I made a year ago when I first designed the pattern, and I no longer have that sweater. It was a gift, so I don't have it anymore. But honestly, for a year-old pattern, I am quite happy with how it turned out. The puffy sleeves are still puffy. The fit is actually super comfy. I think I might have to take a deep dive into the pattern and figure out why this is so comfortable. Because it's just it doesn't tug anywhere. I don't know, it feels really great. Maybe it's the looser tension. I don't know. But I hope you guys liked the tutorial. I hope you liked the pattern. If you want to buy it for yourself and follow along again on this video to use it as a tutorial in the future, you can find the link in my Etsy shop. And if you just want to support me, you could go there and buy the pattern as well if you'd like. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you had a good time. I did. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!